Okay. Hello. This is Chapter 8, Physiological Assessments. Let me just turn this on. There we go. So assessments are a great tool for measuring your client's progress, setting goals. You can do these. We'll go through all these different types of different tests. We'll start by composition, get into vascular tests, and then a lot of clients like to know their muscular endurance, some like strength, and we'll also talk about athletic testing also. But the first one we're going to talk about is probably the most important because it deals with their weight and their body composition, and that's what most people are trying to change. So with all these assessments, we're just looking to improve and set goals, and assessments are a great starting point. Get to the next slide. Before we get into that, though, I want to talk about when we should be terminating a test. A lot of this content in today's lecture won't be used on the ACE exam so much, but this is one of the things that will probably be on it, is when to terminate a test. It has blood pressure here, so if your blood pressure changes significantly, you're going to want to stop the test. However, you're not really taking blood pressure during assessments unless you're in a laboratory setting, which most personal trainers are not training in a laboratory setting. The things that are obvious they would stop testing, though, is if they have some sort of chest pain, if they have extreme fatigue and no longer can continue the test, if they're lightheaded or pallor, which means they're pale in the face, so if they don't look too good, you should be stopping the test. Any type of poor circulation or leg cramping. Also, if they just request to stop the test, and obviously if your equipment were to fail, you can't really continue the test anymore. So if any of those were to happen, you'd want to stop the test immediately and follow up. But most of the time, your assessments go on without any sort of issues. Move on to the next slide. All right, so the first type of assessments we're going to talk about have to do with your height and weight, circumferences, and body composition. So weight is a very normal measure for people who are trying to obviously drop weight. But I always say weight is just a number. You got to look what your weight is made out of. So that's where your body composition comes into play. So your body composition takes into account your skeletal muscle mass, so your muscle, and your fat mass. And most clients, they just want to decrease that fat mass. And typically you can do that and sometimes maintain your body weight because you're maintaining some sort of muscle or gaining muscle. So your body weight might not fluctuate too much, but your body fat percentage may go way down. So we can do that in a couple different ways, which is what this slide is. The gold standard for body composition is underwater weighing, which is not ideal for most fitness centers. It's more of a laboratory setting, but for that you get dunked into a tank of water, and the amount of water that gets displaced determines what your body composition is, what your percent body fat is. It's a really terrible assessment. You have to breathe out all the oxygen in your lungs, then get dunked under the water. So you're breathing out before you go into the water, measuring it for a second, and coming back up. It's not too fun. Another popular is the bod pod. That just measures the air around you. Also not ideal for a fitness center. A very common one and another very accurate form is skin folds, which I'll go over in the next couple slides. That is sometimes popular in your fitness facilities, but it really depends on the facilitator. If the facilitator is new at skin folds, it might not get accurate measurement. If you're getting skin folds done by a different person facilitating each time, you might get a little bit different results. So it's not the greatest, in my opinion. What I prefer is biological impedance. So you've probably seen smaller versions of this, but usually you have some sort of handheld device, And what happens is this machine will send a little laser through your body, and it will measure the water content in your muscle and in your fat. So when the speed that laser is going in your muscle will go a lot faster because there's a lot more water in your muscle compared to your fat. In the speed of that laser moving through your body, it takes usually like a minute or two to get you a reading, will determine your body fat percentage. And that's also very accurate as long as you're normally hydrated. If you're overly hydrated, your percent body fat will be a lot lower. If you're dehydrated, your percent body fat will be a lot higher because that little laser is measuring the water content. So you always want to make sure your client is regularly hydrated, not overly or dehydrated when you're taking the biological impedance. But that's what we use at Rec Sports. We use biological impedance. We actually use this in Body 570, super accurate. It has 6 points of contact. So the laser is going in and out of your arms, your feet, and then also your fingertips as you're gripping that handle there. And it spits out a really nice analysis of your body composition. But Ace likes to go over skin folds a little more. So skin folds, I'll just show you, that's when you are pinching the skin and you get a little reading in millimeters on the calibers there. The most popular one is the Jackson Pollock 3-site skin fold, which goes over that in the next couple slides. You don't need to know how to do that for the ACE exam, but it might be something that you want to learn how to do so you can measure your client's body fat percentage through the skin folds. But what you do is you go through these 3 sites, you're pinching the skin, you're just measuring the subcutaneous fat that's on the surface near the skin. So you're measuring that in millimeters, and then you simply just put that into an equation calculator, which I have a link here that takes you to the 3-site skin fold measurement for men and women there. And they are different for males and females because each gender kind of holds their fat in different areas, so it kind of highlights that. So for men, the first site is on the chest, so you kind of go right below the nipple line and closer to the armpit, and halfway between that, you would take that measurement. Also for on the thigh for men, so again, it's halfway between your hip bone and the top of the kneecap there. So you just find that middle point. It can be very general, it's going to be specifically in the middle. And then you pinch and get that measurement. And the last one is a couple inches to the left to right of the abdomen. So those are your 3 skin folds for men. For women, it's a little bit different. We're looking at the back of the arm. So that's halfway between the elbow and the bottom of the shoulder there. Real general, middle of the point there. Again, they're doing the thigh, same for men. Find that point of the hip and the top of the kneecap. And the last one is more on the side of those obliques there. So you find that hip bone and you go right above it, a couple inches to the left or to the right of it, towards the median of the body, and find that skin fold right there. And that's a diagonal fold, not up and down. So those are good. You can always practice that. And the calibers are aren't of a too bad of an investment. I think you can probably get them for $40, $50. You can also get handheld biological impedance devices, probably for the same cost. So either one is a good tool to have if you're doing your own practice as a trainer. These are the body fat percentages that are ideal for males and females. So you can look at the difference there. So if you get your measurement and your client is in the 20s, if you have a male, you want to get them closer to maybe 15%. And then you can kind of see what the differences there are. So that's a really good measure, is to figure out what the percent body fat is and try to decrease that body fat through exercise, and then reassess after a month or so. I would never assess someone after week to week. It just becomes too much. Usually see good results after 4 to 6 weeks. So always reassess after that, and then you can kind of see how their body percentage has decreased. And like I said, their weight may stay the same, but it just means they increase their muscle mass and decrease that fat mass. Another measure would be your BMI. BMI is not the greatest though. That just takes a factor into your weight and then your height. So it doesn't really take into effect your body fat per se. So if you are a tall person with a lot of muscle mass, you might have a higher BMI, and you might be asked to calculate someone's BMI on the ACE exam. So you might want to know what this equation is. In the fitness world, we usually go by kilos, so kilograms per metric. But if you do get someone who is, they give you their pound in their weight in pounds, that's their conversion right there, and that's your conversion in inches. So just make sure you convert that to metric before you use this particular equation. You might have to do that for the ACE exam. On the online test, there's like a calculator integrated into the computer, so you would use that. So you just got to know what you want to divide by. It's height squared divided by weight in kilos. It's not listed here, but your overweight BMI is 25 to 30. Anything above 30 is considered obese, and ideally you want to be between 18 and 24 BMI. But again, not a good measure of health because if you're muscular and tall, you're going to have a high BMI. Girth measurements are another really good marker. A lot of clients like to decrease their waistline. So you can measure that. We do that in centimeters, again, in metric. You can see what is considered high risk and what's low risk. So ideally you want a thinner waist. So waist measurements are measured at the belly button, so that girth around there. You would measure that, and ideally you want to be closer to 94. But the higher waist circumference you have, the more risk you are for heart disease and other diseases. So we want to keep that down. A doctor might tell your client that they need to decrease their waistline for things like diabetes or heart disease, because a lot of those are directly correlated to their waistline, and a lot of people hold a lot of fat there, so we gotta try to decrease that. Other girth measurements you might want to take though, if you have someone who's trying to increase muscle mass, you can measure, say, their chest or their biceps or their thighs. You just find the middle point of that area of the body and measure that, record it, and try to increase that muscle mass, increase that girth over a month or so. So it's also a very good marker for strength training as well. Also, a waist to hip ratio. So it's just taking in the waist, so it measures around the belly button. And then the hips, you measure that at the widest part around your hips. And then you get that ratio, and these are the norms. Obviously, you want to be closer to the excellent range. So another way you can measure someone, I prefer just to measure my client's waist. It's a lot easier. But if they're trying to decrease both their waist and hip, you can do both and find what their ratio is and share what the norms are with them. So with all of those assessments, we do all those type of measurements before exercise. So if you do exercise, some areas of your body might get more swelled up, and water gets pulled to certain areas that are working out. So you might get bad measurements. So you always do those before exercise, and then you would go through the test, and then you kind of talk through your client, their test results, and then always keep in mind, try to be positive if they're real bad results, and say like, well, we'll fix on this, and we'll set goals, and then always reevaluate after a month or so. And that's pretty much your measuring protocols there. Other form of tests is cardiovascular. So in cardiovascular tests, so that's being able to um, be more efficient with your respiratory and be able to like run faster or be able to take in more oxygen per during your cardio. So we talk about that in VO2 max. So VO2 max, you would do that only in a laboratory setting. So that's what this picture would be up in the corner here. So typically you would have to put on some sort of mask that measures the output of oxygen. And so in a laboratory setting, you're going to push your heart rate to its maximum capacity. And most of the time you find that by you just do 220 minus your age, and that's what your max heart rate is most likely will be. So you try to push yourself to that max heart rate, and then this computer will measure the amount of oxygen you're taking in and how much you're breathing out, and it will give you a number of your VO2 max. So you can see here it's represented in milliliters of kilogram per minute. So if you take your VO2 max and say you're at, let's say 36, that means you're taking in 36 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight every minute during your cardio, and that's at your max potential. So the higher the number, the better. And you can see the averages for males and females, and it changes with age. However, we do not do max VO2 tests in the personal training world. We will use submax. So what submax is, we'll work someone at their submax heart rate. So that is like a moderate intensity, much lower heart rate, and then using an equation to determine what their max heart rate would be, or what their VO2 max would be. Most people will use the step test, which we'll go over in a second. But first we'll go over a bike test. So laboratory settings, you might use a bike test for sub-VO2 max equation. They oftentimes look like this, the bikes do. It's great because you're in a controlled environment and you're going at submax, you're not doing anything too difficult, and most people are able to pedal on a bike just fine. However, in our setting, it's not ideal, and that bike might be kind of scary to your typical client, or stepping up and down on a riser may not be. ACE uses the YMCA bike test. If you want to learn how to do that test, there's a short example here and a long example to some YouTube videos that I found. You do not need to know how to do this protocol for the test. It will not ask you any questions about it, but they want to share the information with you. But what you do is you're riding on a bike at a heart rate of somewhere between 90 and 100 beats per minute. And you're holding that heart rate for 1 to 3 minutes, and the person facilitating the test will record your heart rate, and then depending on where you are, you're going to increase the resistance on the bike in these different stages, and there's 4 stages. So the higher your heart rate is, the less resistance you're adding on over time. And then you record those heart rates, and you plot those heart rates on this chart here, and then you'll be able to find your max heart rate, what your sub VO2 max would be. In this example, this person, theirs would be around just about 2.0 milliliters a minute. So you can chart that. But again, you can look at these examples. You take your blood pressure during it and everything. It's really time consuming and not ideal for your normal client. It'd be very intimidating for someone who's maybe even new to the gym, but fun to do if you're really into your own fitness. What is ideal would be the step test. So step test you can do with large groups. It's super easy to administer. You just need some sort of step. It doesn't have to be the fitness steps. It can just be like a wooden box too. It only takes 3 minutes, sometimes 4. And you just need a stopwatch and be able to take someone's heart rate. We also use the YMCA submax step test, or the ACE does, and rec sports, when we want to take our client submax values, we also will use this protocol. There's examples right here. But essentially, you're measuring someone's heart rate over the span of 3 minutes as they're stepping up on the on those risers right there. And once you get those heart rates, you put them into this calculator. There's a link there, and it'll spit out your sub VO2 max numbers right there. In the slide previously, we'll have your norms if you're interested in those. You can even do that in yourself, real simple. It's gonna be able to take your heart rate. But that video is really informative. Okay, so those are our submax tests. Like I said, most people will use the step test. Some clients aren't even interested in any sub VO2 max tests. Most people don't even think about like, oh, I can decrease the amount of oxygen I'm breathing in during cardio. They're more so concerned about efficiently walking a mile or jogging a mile or increasing distances, which we'll go over that in a second. We're going to talk about thresholds for next. So thresholds, ACE uses VT1 and VT2, so it's your ventilatory thresholds. VT1 is when, say, you're doing a light jog and just heavy breathing, but you're still able to function just fine. And then VT2 would be like really, really hard work. So think about when you're doing a sprint and you have like a burning feeling in those legs you can't do anymore and you're super heavy breathing. That's like your VT2 area. ACE uses these for their IFT model, which I think we go over next week. And we'll revisit these, but that's VT1 is think of jogging, VT2 think of sprinting. If you have a client that you want to work at a certain level, we use the submax talk test. So for example, you would explain to your client a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being rest, 10 being really hard work. I want you to walk on the treadmill so you feel like a 5. And that would be a good submax moderate area. So they'll be in that VT1 area. You're not really getting to VT2 until you're getting to 9 and 10. So if you want your client to, say, do some sort of moderate cardio, I would tell them to go around 5. Maybe they get a little better, they can get to that 7 or 8. If they're super new to exercise, I would keep them around a 4 or 3. But use the talk test. So talk test would be being able to keep a full sentence while walking on the treadmill. So you can use either on a scale of 1 to 10, feel like a 5, or if you're, say, you're walking with someone, you're able to have a conversation with them. If you're only able to have a couple words at a time, you might be getting closer to that 7 or 8. So it's getting a little bit more difficult to talk to the person next to you. And then if you're not able to say any words at all, you're probably in that VT2 area. So that's that 9 and 10 and then 10 scale. So you can kind of teach your client that. That's a good way to get them to work out at a certain intensity for their cardio. And we'll go over more of this VT2 and VT1 stuff during cardiovascular training. There's a whole lecture on it in the IFT model. There's also a VT2 threshold test that you'll probably never do unless you're in a laboratory setting. What you do is you have a cycle bike and it has a really high resistance and you pedal as fast as you can for like 2 minutes, and it's very hard to do. So you're doing hardest work you could do for 2 minutes at high resistance, and then they draw your blood and then they measure the amount of lactate in your blood. That's just another way that you can do that in the lab. Obviously you don't do that if your clients. Field testing, so think of running outside for field testing. That's very popular, so this is another method that you would use. A very popular one would be your Rockport fitness walking test. So if you have a client that is new to exercise and is only able to walk, and they are able to walk efficiently, you can have them do this test. So for this, you have your client walk a mile as fast as they can, and then you record their time and heart rate, and you just plug it into this really long equation here. You do their body weight in kilos. Gender, you put 0 for females, 1 for males. And it spits you out that VO2 number. That'll be your sub VO2 max for a walking test, and you have some averages for time here. So this is good to get your clients sub-max values, and also you can determine, say if they walked that mile in 16 minutes, you can try to have them improve that over time. So you can also have them improve their actual distance time, and then also see how their VO2 increases over time also. So that's a really good one, especially for your deconditioned clients. If you have someone who's a little more conditioned, you can have them do a 1.5 mile run. So same way, you just run a mile and a half as fast as you can, and you just put in the time in minutes, and that gets you your VO2. That one's a little bit more straightforward with the equation. Also really good to record your time and try to beat that also. With both of these tests, you want to make sure that you are in a controlled environment. So a track is usually pretty good. I know it can be pretty boring running a mile and a half on an indoor track, especially if it's small. Outdoors, you're going to be running up and down hills, and there could be wind and weather and all sorts of stuff. Humidity is always an issue. So you might get different results just based on weather and the incline you're on alone. So that's why doing indoor track might be good. You can do a treadmill, although that might not be the greatest, because you might be able to go faster than the treadmill and not realize it. So you have to constantly change your speed, so it's not ideal. But indoor tracks are always really good. And also for your, if you do have someone who's running outside, just make sure they don't have allergies or asthma that could disrupt their actual running once they start getting the heart rate up. Those are our cardiovascular tests. Going to part 3 here, which has to do with endurance tests. So we have 2 types of endurance tests. We have muscular endurance, and then we have muscular strength. So 2 different types of muscular tests, I should say. Endurance and strength. So endurance is doing as many repetitions as you can over a period of time with some sort of weight. Most of the time it's body weight. And then usually do that for over a minute. So think of doing 20 body weight squats within a minute. That would be like an endurance. Whereas your 1 rep max on a bench press would be like your strength test, which we'll go over in a second. But muscular endurance testing, real simple to do. This is also a good one if you have a newer client who's deconditioned, because most of these tests are body weight, and you're just doing as many repetitions as you can. And it's also a good marker if you want to see if someone's increasing in their strength. And usually there's little equipment to be used because, again, it's body weight. A common one would be your push-up test. So the protocol for males is on the toes, and then you want to go down so you're about fist level, or you can use a block. Either one's good. She's using a fist. This guy's using a block. For females, you can do the test from your knees. They can also do it from the toes if they choose to. But the standard test is from the knees. And so for both of these, you would do as many push-ups as you can for 1 minute. And the trainer would count them, and as long as they're good push-ups and they're not breaking form, the push-ups count, and you go as long as you can without stopping for a minute. And the moment you break, or you are unable to do any more, so say you do 35 push-ups in 50 seconds and you have to stop, then you don't get to rest and try to do more. You stop at that 50 seconds. So doing as many as you can until failure, or for 1 minute. And you can record what they get and try and improve that over time. Same thing for the curl-ups. So that's the same for both males and females. Real simple knee bend position, and then you just got to get that upper back off the ground for that crunch. You want to put the hands over the chest, You don't want the hands using their momentum to shoot them forward, so that's why you keep them close to the body. And this is done the same as the push-ups, so you go as many as you can for a minute until failure. You don't break form, don't take breaks. So that's a good way to get your upper body. So push-ups is a good way to get your upper body endurance, and then curl-ups would be good to get your core muscular endurance. You can also do a plank if you want. So you can have your client hold a plank for as long as they can and record that time. However, if they have weaker shoulders or something that or weak back muscles, the core the plank not be as good as the curl up test. For lower body, we like to use bodyweight squats. So for those squats, we want to make sure that the knees or the midline over the midline of the foot there, so the hips are back and then the chest is up. This particular person has their hands forward, which is fine. You can put them at their sides too if they want. But you're doing as many as you can in the minute also without breaking form. Some of your newer clients that are newer to exercise may not be able to squat that easily. So this one may not be ideal, but if they're able to do squats, you can do them that way. You have them do an exercise ball too. You just put the exercise ball on their back and you put it against the wall and do them that way. That works also. You just want to retest the same way that you did it the first time. And then opposite of that would be muscular strength. So this is as many repetitions as you can. Muscular strength is 1 rep max. Think of power, moving as much physical weight as you can in the least amount of reps. Muscular strength isn't really a goal of most clients, I would say, at least the ones I have experienced. But if they are interested, this is also a good marker for fitness. Very easy to do. Use normal equipment. So for any 1 rep max type of test, you want to warm up first. You should never go in cold and do as much weight as you can. You might injure yourself. So you would want to do some sort of dynamic warm up and then have them do the movement with significantly less weight and do maybe 12 to 15 reps with that less weight. So you can coach them on their form, make sure their form is good before you start. And then do the heavy stuff. So then you pile on the weight, and then you always want to spot them. You're not helping them. He's just making sure they don't injure themselves and they're able to lift it. And you just do 1 rep. And then if you're able to do that 1 rep fairly easily, you can add on more weight and try to do it again. And you just keep trying and trying until you get more and more weight with your 1 rep. So this is bench. You just do your normal bench press with a straight bar. Real simple there. With all of these, you want to be sure to avoid any type of, if they say have a shoulder injury, obviously avoid this one and stick to the muscular endurance test. Leg press would be for your lower body, so you can use any type of machine that way. But same thing, warm up, reduce the weight, make sure they have good form, and then add in the weight. I'm not a fan of the machines doing this. I prefer to use the next one, which is squat. But same thing, if you have a deconditioned client, this might be a good one to do if they really want to see their muscular strength, because machines are easily used. But again, I would refer to the endurance testing over the strength. Squats, same thing, just make sure you have the good squat form. This particular photo is not that great. It looks like she has bad form. Looks like her knees are over her toes there. The other photo from before was better. But make sure they have good form, same protocol, and throw on the weight, see how much they can do. And we're going to move on to sport skills. So your sport-related skills assessments is more so for your athlete population. Maybe if you have youth athletes, maybe doing some of these. Your average client, though, most likely not, unless you're working with actual athletes all the time. But with any of these, we'll talk about the IFT model next week. And there's there's 4 levels in the IFT model, and when you have someone in the 4th level, that's your athletic population. That's when you would be using these assessments. You can use these with your average clients if they have interest in learning what their agility is and whatnot, but for the most part, we don't typically use these assessments with our average people. Power testing, that is doing some sort of like power move. So not like your 1 rep max. Think of plyometric moves. So like a vertical jump and a long jump. So you're exerting some sort of force without dumbbells or weights or anything. Body weight, one forceful repetition, and doing max effort that way. So examples would be staying long jump, where you're starting at one point and going as far as you can, and then you measure the heels where they land. I'm sure you've seen this in like track and field events. Actually, yeah. Vertical. This is an easy one to do also. You can give the person like some like painter's tape and have them jump as high as they can, stick it on the wall, then measure it that way. That's a really good measure of your vertical jump there. There's also, I'm sure you've seen them, the vertical jump sticks where you get to jump up, slap the little sticks, and you it tells you how high they jump that way. Both are super easy. You just gotta measure it and then reassess. ACE doesn't share values for this because they're all based on athletic populations, and most are like college athletes. But you can find what average a good average for any of these are online. Speed and agility and quickness tests. So that's our agility. Agility would be able to change directions very quickly, and so you're changing direction, stopping on a dime, and maybe changing your momentum to switch directions that way. And speed is being able to do a certain distance over a quicker amount of time. Agility, and a good test would that be your pro agility for that. You start in the middle of, usually it's 10 yards, and then you run past the turning point line, so you're stopping as fast as you can, and then you're running towards the other way, past the other turning line, and then you're stopping again, and then the time is stopped once you hit that middle point again. And again, you can find the averages online if you want to. Very good for youth population because they have usually underdeveloped agility, so you can always test them with this one and try to improve it over time. 4-yard dash is a really good standard for your speed testing. Also, 100-meter dash is also pretty common, but you just simply start the stopwatch, run that distance, and then record your time. Real simple. That's all of them. Like I said, these ones you don't use, the athletic ones you don't use too much. But if your client ever wants to, you have the skills to do it. So with all of these, ACE won't ask you too many questions. The questions they will ask you is if they'll give you a particular client doing something and ask you if they should terminate the test. Also, they might give you a client profile and say what tests would be the most appropriate for this particular person. So if you have someone who's deconditioned and injured and trying to lose weight, what would be the best test? The best test would be weight, body composition, those type of tests. If you have someone who is a veteran in fitness and they're trying to train for their half marathon, what test would be the best? The answer would be that like 1.5 mile run. So those are the type of questions you'll be asked. And I'll have a couple examples on our end of the program exam. But that's it. That's chapter 8. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll try to answer the best of them, your questions best that I can. Thanks.